We're here today not only to have a good old chat with Tom Youngs, but also to talk about his book, which is published today. What dreams are not quite made of. No fame, no fortune, just football and multiple sclerosis. I'll just do a quick introduction for Tom. As you know, he played for United between 1997, well, first team between 97 2003, yeah. But he'd actually been playing, he's been with the club from the age of 10. And he signed on YTS terms in 96 while staying on at school to do his A-levels. But the next year he was awarded a 2-year program contract just at the age of 17 and bypassed the rest of the YTS scheme. Full debut was on the 2nd of September 97 as a sub for Michael Kidd, it says here, in a 4-1 home win over Colchester. Contract extension came in December 98 and he was making more and more appearances by 98-99, which as you'll remember was a good year. Promotion as runners-up. The first league goal came on 23rd of September 99 in a 2-1 defeat at Gillingham. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I remember it. I'm ashamed about the result. But
yeah.
It's a good goal.
But after that, the goals started flowing, and I shall cut to the end here. By the time Tom left United, he'd scored 48 of them in 145 appearances plus 35 subs. He played under a good few managers, some exceptional managers, Roy McFarlane, of course, John Beck, and good old Shaggy. And he played with some amazing forwards as well. In the forward line with people like Dave Kitson, of course, Shane Tudor, Omar Itza, and the unforgettable Tony Scully. In 2002, there was a sort of a 5 Live radio version of University Challenge, right? Which Tom was United. This is a game before a game with Millwall, and Tom came up against a Millwall bloke whose name I haven't got here, but he won 3-2, thanks not to his A-levels, but to his knowledge of the cheeky girls. Sold to Northampton, unfortunately, in 2003, when just couldn't come to agreement on a contract. But it's fair to say, injury problems over the years, there've been a few, haven't there? And they returned at the Cobblers. He had a brief spell at Leyton Orient, moved to Bury while he was doing their sports journalism degree, is that? Yeah, at Staffordshire University, same as my nephew did actually.
Stoke.
Stoke. Who said Stoke?
Stoke. Stoke, was it Tom?
He was in Stoke, he was Staffordshire University.
Was someone on the same course as you?
Yeah. He then joined Stafford Rangers, which I've got connections with as well. But we turned to good old East Anglia to sign for the club over the river. He had a few games as trialist in 2008. There was that Gary Bravin's time, I think.
Yeah.
But no contract came in that. Moved on to Auburn City, Norwich United, and then player assistant manager at Milton Old Town, but only 32 when he had to retire because of the injury. The hip injury, was that?
Yeah, my hips, yeah.
So yeah, fitness problems had plagued his career. I'll just finish with the words of John Taylor describing Tom. I don't think you'll find a forward in the lower divisions who understands the game as much as Tom Youngs. The runs he makes and the positions he takes up, as well as the way he brings other players into the game, are all excellent. He knows exactly where to be, and he goes in bravely. Well, he's coming here bravely today. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm coconuts welcome to Tom Youngs. And as I say, we're going to have a chat with Tom, but we're also going to do a book signing afterwards. The book retails at $14.99, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
You're up here to buy your book and get it signed by Tom. But first of all, we'll start talking about multiple sclerosis. Todd, if you don't mind. You know, we hear a lot about it. It's probably fair to say not everyone's got a real good understanding of multiple sclerosis. Could you tell us what exactly it is?
Basically it's a condition of the central nervous system whereby effectively your own immune system attacks your own nervous system, and it causes damage to the nerves, and it can therefore affect any part of your body, because obviously nerves carry the signals for every single part of your body. So it's very enigmatic. It differs massively between people, and from person to person you'll have completely different symptoms, and obviously it can be more severe in some people than others, but it is just something that we don't know a lot about still, and there's no cure for it. So it's one of those things where it's just kind of a bit of a wait and see how things develop, and take it from there, really.
Yeah, thanks. So when did you first notice symptoms?
It was about 3 years ago. As Pat said, I was assistant manager at Milton Town, and we were playing an away game at lovely Galston on the Norfolk coast, and I realised I couldn't really see the game much, to be honest. I wasn't following the game very well, and I just assumed it was maybe something to do, it was a sunny day, I'd recently had a cold, I thought it was maybe something to do with that. And then the following week at work, I couldn't see my computer screen very well at work either, so I went to see the opticians, expecting them to say that I needed glasses, which would have been fine, I wasn't bothered about that. But they said, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your eyes, they're perfectly healthy. So then, obviously they had to do more investigation, sent me to hospital, and after a few tests later, I was with the neurology department, and they told me that I had multiple sclerosis, basically. So it went.
So there you are, you've been diagnosed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Was that the spur for the book? Or did you want to talk about your career and so on before the diagnosis?
Well, it's kind of a bit of a combination, really. I'd always had in the back of my mind that, you know, the amount of people who always ask you, oh, you're a footballer, what was that like? What was that like? So I always thought, you know, maybe there was a story there that after I'd done my journalism degree, as you mentioned, thought, you know, possibly, you know, there might be interest or enough interest out there to write a book, to maybe sort of counteract some of the preconceptions about footballers that are obviously out there. But then I kind of put it on the back burner because I thought there's probably not going to be enough interest in a sort of run-of-the-mill League One and League Two player in releasing a book. So it was kind of always in the back of my mind, but no more than that. But then after the diagnosis, when I sort of read up more on MS, and I found that so many people who are diagnosed with it really don't know where to turn, don't really feel comfortable talking about it, because there's not a lot of wider knowledge in society about it. They kind of sort of sometimes go into a bit of a shell. And I was, after reading that about lots of other people, because I was probably the same to start with, I was very much, I don't really want to talk about this. I don't think people will react to it particularly well. They were a bit scared maybe, or a bit confused. So I wanted to keep it to myself to start with. But then when I read that this was the problem for a lot of people who are diagnosed, I thought, well, you know, I've got a little bit more profile than a lot of these people. So possibly, maybe I could sort of try and do something about that and get a bit more awareness out there, encourage people to be a bit more open about it. And it might help. So it was kind of a combination then of thinking, well, there's a story to tell about my football career that I'd always thought, you know, maybe it was worth telling, plus this as well. Once they came together, managed to speak to some people and got in touch with a publisher, and he was interested in it, and there we go.
And what sort of treatment are you having at the moment? Is there any drug that helps?
Currently, I'm eligible for drug treatment. I'm in consultation with my neurologist all the time. I'm eligible for the treatment, but at the moment, because I'm dealing with things quite well, and it's not progressing too much at the moment, I'm opting to sort of stay away from the drug route at the moment. Obviously it's there once, if things do develop and I do need it, then I've got those drugs are available to me, but at the moment I just want to try and steer clear from it as long as I can, because obviously once you start down that road you're going to keep going with it, and I'd rather try and wait as long as possible before I do so.
I think that's very wise. Okay, shall we talk about football?
Please do.
We'll throw it open to the floor. Tom over there has a question. Not only has he got a question, he also has a roving mic, a wireless mic, which you can pass around. It would help, please, if you waited for the mic before you put your question. Okay? Tom, what do you want to ask?
I was going to say, Tom, it was a bit like Land of the Giants out there today. How do you think you would have approached a game like that?
I think when you're playing against obviously big players, and I used to play against players that were a lot bigger than me, you can only sort of run the channels and turn them around some other way, which I think it was difficult in the first half today for Cambridge to do, with Joe being up there on his own, but they definitely improved in the second half when he got a bit of support with Ben up there with him, and it enabled Cambridge to get up the pitch a bit more, because otherwise you do get very isolated as a front man. If the ball keeps coming up and these big galoos keep coming and heading it back, then it's a bit difficult to carry the fight to them. So it's always important to try to turn them around and expose them that way, because in all likelihood then they're going to be forced to drop back towards their own goal, and it gives you a bit more space. But if everything's in front of them, that's how they love it, big defenders. They just want to come and attack everything, put it back in behind your defence, and that's kind of how the first half went, I think, a lot today.
Yeah, and I think when Ben Williamson came on, he did manage to run those channels and turn a couple of the big guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it helped Joe as well. I thought he was a bit isolated in the first half, and it also allowed a bit more, like Piero could then maybe get the ball a bit higher up the pitch today in the second half, and he was more effective. I mean, not just his goal, but in general, I think he was more effective in the second half. He was able to get the ball a bit higher up the pitch where he could really affect the game, and that helped with having the two strikers up there. But that's what managers are paid to do, and Sean obviously made that decision at half time, and I think it certainly paid off, certainly for the first 20 minutes of the second.
Okay, thanks. Let's have another question, please. Ian, over on the our right, your left.
Couple of questions actually. Firstly, who was your favourite player who to play alongside when you were at United? And secondly, any memories, good or bad, of the John Beck era second time around?
In terms of favourite players, there were quite a lot. Personally, I always enjoyed playing with Alex Russell, because when I was playing either on the opposite flank to him, or if I was playing up front and he was behind, I just knew that whatever movement I made, he was going to spot it, he was going to try to play me in, and he had the quality to do it. So you weren't wasting runs, you weren't wasting movement, it was going to get picked up. So we had sort of quite a good affinity. Unfortunately, obviously I know I had trouble with injuries, but Alex had even more, and unfortunately therefore he wasn't always playing when I was playing, but he was certainly sort of probably had my best relationship as a player with him, I would say. And then also Zima as well. When Zima was in the team, it made things so easy for me to sort of, he was so reliable with the ball going up to him, to get hold of it, to win things in the air, to pin their defence back. It really helped me come in. I was obviously playing wide most of the time when Zima was there. So I could judge exactly when to make my runs, to go and join in with him, and he was so reliable with the ball into him that it really helped me, certainly. In terms of the John Beck era second time around, I think it's probably fair to say I wasn't really compatible with John Beck's methods. I haven't got any problem with John whatsoever. I think John obviously was phenomenally successful here the first time around, and he's enjoyed success at lots of different places, particularly with like Histon, even after Cambridge the second time round. So, you know, I've got absolutely no problem with him. Just for me, it was never going to be a regime that I was going to thrive in. I don't think I really had the attributes that he would have prized in someone, whether it was as a wide man or as a forward. You know, I don't think I necessarily fit the template for a perfect John Beck player. But you know, that's fine. That's what happens. You know, the club made the decision to bring him in. Unfortunately, it didn't. I don't think it really worked out for the club in the end, and it certainly didn't work out for me. But you know, that's football.
Okay, what was John Taylor like to play for as a manager?
I really got on with Shaggy. It was difficult in that he was a friend and a teammate before taking over, so it took quite a long time to stop calling him Shaggy during the gaffer. But you know, he knows the game really, really well. I think he would probably be the first to admit it was possibly a bit early for him to get the job here. I think it would have been an ideal job for him in the time, but I think I've spoken to him about it, you know, since, and he thinks maybe if he'd had more time to do coaching badges and management training and everything before taking the job, that might have been beneficial. But you know, from my point of view, he was a very good coach, very good manager. And I think he did pretty well in my time here with him. Just unfortunately, we were a very, very young squad, and we kind of ran out of steam that 2002-03 season eventually, with a lot of cup runs and a few injury problems. We just didn't quite have the strength and depth to probably deal with it. But it was certainly an exciting side to play.
Sure. Just to complete the managers, we did have Roy Mack here for a Q&A last season, and he spoke very highly of you, of course. What was he like to play for?
I think I was spoilt really that my first manager was Roy McFarland, because I think after that everyone else is going to come up short, to be honest. He had obviously immense football knowledge, you know, England captain and all of that, but he was really good as a person. He had authority when he needed it, and I thought he was great, and all the lads loved playing for him. You know, obviously we were successful, we got promoted under him, and then he managed to keep us up in the league above when probably not many people thought we were going to do that. But just his all round, he was just a really, really top manager. I mean, the fact that he obviously gave me a contract was made me have a high opinion of him in the first place. But yeah, he was just a great manager to play for, and the lads were, certainly I was, very, very disappointed when we couldn't save his job. It was a very hard time for us.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question from the floor, please. Right in the front here. Who's got the mic? Is it Tom?
Thanks a lot. Hi, Tom. We've heard that you joined the club when you were very young, when you were 10, if I heard that correctly. So was it the case that it always was a childhood dream that you were going to be a professional footballer? If it hadn't turned out that way, what do you think you would have ended up doing?
I mean, it is a dream in such that playing football was great right from a young age, and I was lucky enough to get picked up by the Centre of Excellence here at 10, like you say, and then managed to keep going through it. So once you're sort of in that professional sort of environment, it's always going to be, yeah, that's what I want to be, that's what I want to be. I couldn't think of any better job to do than being a footballer, and having been a footballer for 10 years or whatever it was, I would still agree with that assessment. There's no better job in the world. If I hadn't, I mean, I had a place to study law at Birmingham University, which I turned down to sign pro here, so I would probably have gone that way, I should imagine, and that would have made sense at the time. But once football was on the table, once Roy had offered me a contract here, there was no contest. That was what I was doing.
Thank you.
You ended up Well, you work for Green King now as a management accountant, is that right?
That's true.
How did that
yes.
happen?
Well, as you said earlier, I did a degree in sports journalism, and I was doing that for a couple of years, probably mostly freelance, working a lot in the non-league press, and over time I just found it wasn't quite for me. I wanted something a bit more stable and reliable to sort of support my family, and every careers advisor at school I'd ever had said, "Oh, accountancy, yeah, you're good at maths, yeah, that'll do, accountancy." So I kind of thought, and I've got a couple of mates who are in accountancy, so I thought, yeah, let's have a go at that. So I started getting the bog standard first qualifications off my own back, and then I was really lucky in that within a couple of weeks of signing up with a temp agency, there was an opening at Green King, and I got in the door, and then thankfully another opening came while I was there, and I've been there 6 and a bit years now, so it's gone pretty well.
Okay, another football question? Barry here. Tom, Barry's down the front here.
Welcome back, Tom. It's good to see you back at the Abbey. And it is the Abbey. Yeah, I saw on social media this week from Bury in Lancashire that you scored 2 of the most important goals of the millennium. You're very revered in Bury. One of them I understand was at, I think whether they were champions at the time or not, but it was Walsall, managed by Richard Money at the time. Bit of a classic goal, I understand. And before you answer that, will you be taking your book to the people at Bury as well?
Quite possibly. I think that tweet came about from my good friend who works in the press in Bury, who tried to describe me as the most important player of the millennium for Bury, which is quite good since I only played about 45 games for them. But yeah, the Walsall goal was the second one. It was 2 years on the bounce, funnily enough. The first year, last game of the season, there were 7 teams that could go down, and we were one of them. And with 10 minutes to go, I scored against Notts County to put us 2-0 up. We ended up drawing 2-2. So I think Mark, the guy in the press, was trying to say that if I hadn't scored and we'd lost 2-1, then a late goal from Oxford could have taken us down into the conference. The following year was Walsall, who were just crowned, or just about to be crowned, champions, and I had been totally frozen out for about 5 months. I had barely played I think I played about a half of football in the previous 5 months, and then kind of out of nowhere, the manager just pulled me up before the game that day and said, "I need you today. You're playing." So, which you just get on with it. That's great. It's great to play. You never know when it's going to be your last game, and it almost was actually. So, and we sort of competed with Walsall quite well, unexpectedly, and just before half time, the ball got hooked over the top. I chased after it. Anthony Gerrard, cousin of Stephen, was centre half for them. I kind of took him by surprise. He tried to clear it, headed it straight into my face, and it bounced over their goalkeeper and into the net, and it proved to be the winner, and we won 1-0. And and that meant that we were safe. It didn't quite mean that we were safe, but it was a very unexpected result. And then with another point, we managed to secure our safety. And I think what he was getting at is that if Bury had gone down at any point at that, or at any point really, with the parlous financial state of the club at the time, it probably would have been curtains, a bit like I think I say in the book about when Cambridge, if they had gone down to the Conference South, that first year under when Jimmy saved it at the end, I think it, as sad as it is, it possibly would have been the same state here. I'm so glad that it wasn't, and that now we're back in the league and enjoying the first game of the season here.
Well, sort of. Another question, please. Who do we have? In the middle row here, please.
Hi. I just wanted to ask what your favourite goal was while you were playing for United.
I I don't think there's too many competing for that honour, I've got to be honest. Most of them were 5-yard tap-ins, so the half volley at Scunthorpe that ended up sticking in the stanchion is one of only 3 that are actually available on YouTube. That must tell you that it's quite well liked. Yeah, that's definitely my favourite goal. It's certainly the one that looks best on the telly. Although I got a lot of stick from the lads because I ran off having scored. I just saw it hit the net and I just ran off and celebrated in front of the fans, as I like to do, obviously. And Trev and Ash and everyone was saying, why didn't you make something? The ball stuck in the stanchion, you should have gone and punched it out or made a real thing of it. I didn't even know it had happened until after the game when they told me. So yeah, so I maybe let myself down there, but yeah, that was definitely my sweetest strike, I think. Not that there was a competition for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people remember that goal fondly. And another question coming up.
Hello, my name's Mark and I've been supporting Cambridge United for nearly 40 years, and I'll start off by mentioning my favourite Tom Young's goal, which actually was in a big win over Rushton, where you ran down the left wing in front of the Abbey stand and you waited for the goalkeeper to put his weight on his left leg to intercept a cross, and then you passed it between his legs into the goal. I don't know whether you remember that one.
Yeah, I do. There's a picture of it in the book, actually. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I should buy it. But the question I really wanted to ask was how what goes on the pitch is affected by what the fans are doing on the terraces and in the stands. And I want to do that by way of a particular example, which actually comes from the era when John Beck came back to be manager, and it's the night game at Brentford, the season that we saved ourselves from relegation, where Paul Evans of Brentford scored with a free kick with 10 minutes to go to put them 2-0 up, and there was just this wall of 1,000 people behind the goal singing the User Staying Up, which was totally irrational, but there was just this sort of amazing belief amongst the crowd that we were going to do it, and we scored twice in the last 10 minutes to get a point, and you scored one of the goals. And so by way of that example, can you sort of describe what it's like as a player out on the pitch when things like that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that whenever you hear things from the fans supportive like that, like you say that night, I mean, we were dead and buried when Paul Evans scored that ridiculous free kick from somewhere out on the touchline, and it was looking pretty dodgy. But then that kind of thing, when you something from the fans can help to galvanise the team, definitely. I think you think of it as a player more the other way. So like today, there were a couple of times when I think from the right back slot, we kind of Cambridge passed the ball back to centre half and it didn't go well, and there's sort of this audible groan, and that's completely understandable. But I think when you're on the pitch, that is the kind of thing that really it affects you. It really affects all the players. So the opposite is certainly true. When you hear the fans, really sort of maybe defying what's going on the pitch like that night, and just you just know that people are with you. It definitely does help. And that was a ridiculous night in the end. Really, it was fantastic.
It's probably my favourite 10 minutes of ever supporting Cambridge United.
It was pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty right. It was right up there. Other than the fact that Dunks nicked in to head the goal.
It was coming to you, wasn't it?
I was definitely ready to head it in myself. But yeah, no, it definitely always. Whenever the fans, there's a groundswell of support in the fans, especially in times like that when there's probably no right to be one. They're just sort of just showing their support. It really does help to galvanise the boys. It can't not. And like I say, it's just conversely, it works the other way. When you don't feel that, when you feel that there's anxiety in the terraces, it's probably going to transfer to the pitch as well.
Thanks, very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Any more questions, please? Tim, is that Tim at the back?
Yeah, why not? Yeah,
go on.
We're freestyling at the back.
Oh, it's the twins.
as you say about the fans just there, how, in one sentence, how good is it to score in front of the Newmarket Road end?
It's absolutely fantastic. It took me a while actually. My first 2 Abbey goals were up the other end, and I'm trying to wrap my brains to think of my first one at the Newmarket Road end. I think it might have been Bristol City out there, where I scored the first one at the other end in the first half, scored the second one in the second half to put us 2-0 up in front of the Newmarket Road end. And yeah, just to be honest, the noise in the Abbey is, no one really appreciates it. When you go to other clubs and they know that Cambridge play in front of, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000 at best fans, they don't expect it to have been, to be a noisy stadium. But when it's, when there's a lot in here, it is so loud. It really is. I think it's just so tight. I think initially, which quite appreciably, when you've got Sheffield Wednesday coming on this week. I mean, the Sheffield Wednesday game in the cup when I was on the bench was just probably the loudest I think I've ever known a football ground. It was just ridiculous. It was right on top of you, and it was so loud when we scored, when Trev scored the equaliser that eventually took us through. And obviously he scored at the Newmarket Road end, and it was just so loud. And yeah, it just picks you up really, it lifts you up. It's great.
Thank you. Oh, Tim.
Not as good a question as Paul, because obviously he's well versed in these coconuts events. Very quickly, what are the best parts and the worst parts about being a professional footballer?
The best part is just so simple, just playing football every day. I mean, I would want to play football every day if I wasn't getting paid for it. It would be obviously the best thing to do anyway. So getting paid for it as well, you can't beat it. It is the best job in the world, as I said earlier. The worst part, I suppose, is when things aren't going so well, and you're going to get a bit of stick, whether it's from, it might be from the fans, it might be from the press, it can be from your manager, if it's the worst of times. But yeah, I suppose that's the worst part of it. You've just got to be a bit resilient and try and work your way through it and come out the other side. Everyone goes through it. When I was a kid here at Cambridge, I don't think a lot of people probably thought I would manage to get in the first team and stay there very much, because I was obviously quite small, seemed to get injured every other week. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it gives you a bit of determination to try and prove those people wrong. And yeah, that's the hardest thing, but also probably the most rewarding thing when you come through the other side and you're doing well again.
Excellent, yeah. Down the front again, please. This is your second question.
It's my second, without being greedy.
Yeah, no, you have to pay for the third.
I'll buy the book instead. No, it's just because it's interesting you're saying you've moved into accountancy now. That's right?
That's right, yes.
I mean, when people you come across in that field who are not well versed in these things hear that you were a professional footballer, what's their reaction? They must be quite surprised.
Yeah, surprised, definitely. Most people, I mean, quite a few of them, because of Championship Manager, do know that I was a footballer, and obviously being quite local in Bury St Edmunds as well, we tend to get obviously a lot of our workers from the area, so they're more likely to have heard of me as a footballer. But obviously the further away from my career we get, it's going to be more and more surprised, definitely. Yeah, a couple of the young lads who started working in a slightly different department to me, they were completely surprised. I mean, they were probably 4 or 5 when I was playing, so they're not going to remember from that.
Pointed them in the direction of those YouTube videos then.
Well, thankfully I don't have to. Any of my friends do tend to sort of put it about that, you can see him on YouTube, you can. Thanks.
Any more questions? Up at the back there, please, Tom.
So I don't need that, you can all hear me. Having reached the state where you are now, played football, packed up, got a job, got a family, in light of the illness, do you ever feel, why me?
No, to be honest, I'm not. I don't really do self-pity. I'm not very good when other people do it, and I'm not very forgiving of people who kind of go that way. So I think I'm always just, there's something on my plate now, I've got to deal with it and just move on and try and deal with it the best I can. It was the same. I think I was saying on the radio last night. I think being a footballer or coming through the ranks as a footballer really does help with sort of that kind of resilience and that determination to just sort of beat, well, not necessarily beat anything that's put in front of you, but come to terms with anything that's put in front of you and just roll with the punches, really. Yeah, I'm not gonna just sort of sit around thinking, oh, you know, this is bad and it shouldn't have happened to me, anything like that. I just don't think it's a very positive emotion to have, so I tend to avoid it.
Well said. You've got to pay for this one, Barry. Oh, okay. I think after Barry's question, it's so hot in here. I think we'll have one or two more questions after this one, and then we'll get on to some book signing, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Tom, with regard to the illness, you used the word positive there. Before the illness, were you a positive person, and subsequent to the illness, has that changed at all?
I think generally I've always been a very, very positive person, always very optimistic. You know, I've been a Spurs fan for my whole life. And,
never mind.
And so, you know, you have to have optimism to keep going with that. Yeah. But just generally, yeah, I've always been, you know, very, very positive person, very optimistic person, and it hasn't changed that at all. It's just sort of shifted the emphasis. Obviously, there is difficulties because, you know, my family and I and my wife in particular, we probably had this idea of what the future will hold, and it might still hold that, and that's great. You know, we don't know how things are going to progress. We'll have to see, but it might mean that that future is not quite as mapped out, and it might be a bit more difficult. So we have to come to terms with that. But because of the sort of nature of the condition, it's not something you can plan for. You know, I think I mentioned it in the book that one of the first people that I read up about it online was this guy who he had an episode and then 13 years of pretty much nothing at all, no developments whatsoever. And then within a week, he could hardly feel his right leg. He had to stop walking. He couldn't walk. He had to stop working. You know, and that's the kind of thing where you're sort of so out of control of it that you just have to think, no, that whatever happens, happens, and we'll deal with it when it happens. And that's kind of just the way I want to approach it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Hi, are you still involved in football?
No, I was in sort of in the semi-pro world. I was assistant manager at my hometown club, Mildenhall Town. I played for them for a year, and then I've got I need 2 new hits effectively, so I had to stop playing. But then I stayed on as assistant manager because I thought once I've stopped playing, it's going to take a lot to try and recreate that. So if I can stay close to football in any way, I will do. So I stayed on as assistant manager for 4 years, and then after my diagnosis, and then as things sort of progressed a bit, it was just too tiring, to be honest. The condition is fatigue is one of the biggest symptoms that everybody is kind of like the universal symptom of MS, and being involved in the management side of things is a lot more involving actually than even at that kind of level than playing. You know, when you just turn up and do your stuff and then go home. When you're involved in the management side, you're just thinking about it constantly. You're on the phone all the time. You're talking about it, planning. It is probably more exhausting actually, apart from the fact that you're not running around for 90 minutes every week. It is probably more exhausting. So eventually it was getting a bit too much with a job and obviously a young family. I couldn't really justify keep going with being involved in football. It was just too much on my plate, really.
Okay, thanks. That's football's loss. I think. Any more questions, or shall we? Okay, make this the last one then, shall we? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to leave Cambridge, and as a professional footballer, a little bit about what it's like to sort of travel the country looking for a contract, and you know how does that feel? Did you leave a part of yourself here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think there's probably a lot of answers to it in this book here, and I think I had no intention of leaving. I loved it here. I really enjoyed my time at Cambridge, and I was not in any way angling for a move at all. There was quite a lot of interest in me, and then I had a bit of a dispute with the club about my next contract offer, and ultimately I just didn't feel that the club necessarily dealt with me in the best way. So obviously then it became these other offers, which were financially a lot better and a lot more secure, because obviously the club was, we were kind of on a downward slope that would end with the club out of the league, which was awful. It was probably the right time to move on, but it was with a heavy heart, definitely. I do say in the book that the Cambridge fans, and it sounds easy when I'm saying it in front of all you guys, but are by far the best that I've ever known in football. Just something as simple as every time we went out to warm up before the game, any time. The fans here would just cycle through every player and have a song for them, even if they'd only turned up like on the Thursday and they played 2 games for us, and then they'd go away to their parent club and they were just on loan. Someone would come up with something, and there would be somebody who was singing your name, and I just think for everybody on the pitch, it was such a big sort of boon for your confidence, really, having that kind of backing behind you. And it doesn't make anyone else bad supporters at the other clubs I was at, but even with like the most established players at Northampton and Bury, I didn't hear, there weren't sort of names being sung in the same way, certainly not in the same way, and not before the, maybe when something happened, when somebody scored a great goal, their names like me, but not before the game, just as a matter of course, just to try to build everyone up for the game, which I think, like I say, in my experience is quite unique, the way the fans were here in that regard, and that's why it was with a heavy heart that I left. But yeah, and that's why I've always got the best opinion of the Cambridge fans, and I always tell that to anybody.
Wow. Yeah, well, it's what we'd always suspected, actually, that we'd be the best fans in the world. Okay, that might mean the mics don't work anymore. So mine does.
I think we're all right.
Right, good. I'd just like to wind up because we really ought to get on to some book signings, please. Thank you so much for coming, Tom. Thank you for bringing us a message of positivity. There's a little message up there on the wall that says, play with a smile on your face. And I think that pretty much sums up what you brought to, what you brought to Cambridge United. We're going to do book signings now. If you'd like to form an orderly queue, Tom's mum is here, actually, to help. Big round of applause for Tom's mum. It's going to help with the book sales, the signing and the diary. And once more, a really big round of applause for Tom Young. Three of you, I know.
He was only there for a few months, wasn't he? And they used to organise this the Wednesday night games where you went to the Wednesday night. That's what I used to wait to shoot. Sometimes, yeah, I could do it. Go up and down the other one. Right up and can't be busy for your